From Amateur Radio Newsline Report number 2467, this is Ham Nation Headlines for Wednesday, February 12, 2025. Our first story takes us high above the North Pole and the South Pole. A ham radio operator is one of 4 astronauts scheduled to orbit the Earth in the weeks ahead via both poles for the first time.
A ham radio operator is one of 4 astronauts who will be aboard the first spaceflight to orbit the Earth via the North and South Poles. The mission aboard the Fram-2 is scheduled to last anywhere from 3 to 5 days after its scheduled launch sometime after March 1. The spacecraft's name is a tribute to the Fram, a Norwegian-built ship used on expeditions to both poles during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The space mission's pilot, Robbie Rouge of Germany, is that nation's first female astronaut. She holds the amateur radio call signs LB9NJ and KD3AID. She will transmit SSTV images using the amateur radio equipment on board. Although the images are to be sent as part of a high school and university competition for students, the images may be also received by any amateur radio operator capable of receiving SSTV transmissions. After the mission is complete, the images will also be available for viewing on the SSTV Gallery of Amateur Radio on the International Space Station. This is Graham Kemp, VK4BB.
What once was radio history in Austria is now, as expected, reduced to rubble.
The historic shortwave radio transmitting site at Moosbrunn in Austria has been dismantled. The Austrian newspaper Der Standard reports that the demolition in late January marks the end of a long episode in broadcast history. The destruction was described in the newspaper as, quote, a precise targeted explosion, end quote. The facility, built during the Cold War era, had once been home to Radio Austria International. After Radio Austria went off the air in 2003, the transmitter was used by international broadcasters such as Radio DARC, a program produced by the German National Amateur Radio Society. After the closure of the Moosbrunn site at the end of December 2024, Radio DARC moved to the shortwave station in Wooferton, England, which has been carrying it since January. This is Jeremy Bucci for NJH.
It comes around every February. No, not Valentine's Day, but if you love radio, it's just as sweet. Here's Jim Dameron, N8TMW.
World Radio Day, February 13th, was adopted in 2012 by the United Nations to acknowledge radio's role in people's lives everywhere. Although the focus is usually on broadcast radio services, amateur radio will be involved in some events around the world. This year's theme is Radio and Climate Change. One of the many international events happening involves the Shanghai Coast radio station XSG, which maintains a global maritime distress and safety system, as well as Morse code telegraph services. The station is hosting a 2-day crossband event in which the radio station will communicate via CW with amateur radio operators, with each side transmitting on their authorized frequencies while monitoring the other party's frequencies. The event runs from 0 UTC on the 12th of February to 0 UTC the next day. For a list of amateur radio frequencies that XSG will be monitoring for ham transmissions, see the text version of this week's newscast at arnewsline.org.
And that's all from the Amateur Radio Newsline, your independent source for amateur radio news since 1976 at arnewsline.org. With Graham Kemp, VK4BB, Jeremy Boot, G4NJH, Jim Dameron, N8TMW, Karen Eve Murray, KD2GUT at the news desk in New York, and our news team across the globe, I'm Don Wellbanks, AE5DW. 7-3, we'll see you next time here on Ham Nation.